Okay, Snigdha, I think we can start. Ready?
Hi, Rituparna. Hi,
Yeah,
everyone.
yeah, ready? So I'll start.
Sure.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this very interesting session titled An Ethnographer in the Corporate Land with Snigdha Vishnoi. Thank you for joining us on a Saturday evening. So, before Snigdha begins her session, let me very quickly introduce the speaker and the session. First of all, to introduce the speaker, Dr. Snigdha Vishnoi teaches sociology at the School of Liberal Studies, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar University Delhi. She did her MA, M.Phil and PhD from the Department of Anthropology, University of Delhi. Her interest areas include applied anthropology, qualitative research, ethnographic studies, organizational culture, work-people relationship, research methods, corporate community interface, etc. She is also a photography enthusiast and enjoys experimenting with different ranges of creative expressions of academic knowledge and information. Before I proceed further, let me request everyone to please keep their microphones muted for smooth functioning of the session. So in this session, what Snigdha plans to do is highlight the strengths and limitations of using the ethnographic method in corporate settings and organizations. And doing sociology has also paid particular attention to the ethnographic method since it's one of the key methods in sociology and social anthropology. She will discuss in detail her experiences of engaging with organizations in various contexts and capacities, and the utility of ethnographic methods in understanding situated narratives, essentialized meanings, and cultural context in different kinds of workplaces or environments shall also be discussed and elaborated. The ethnographic studies in the given context are seen to put special emphasis on humanizing the workplaces, shifting the focus to cultural meanings and dynamism of processes and participation rather than the numerical trends, metrics, and survey generated insights. The session shall be useful, we hope so, for ethnography enthusiasts willing to use the method and perspective in different social settings. With this, I extend a very, very warm welcome to you, Snigdha, and over to you. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Dr. Rituparna, and thank you, Doing Sociology team. It's an honor. And I think it's a very special occasion to be back situating and talking about your fieldwork experiences that take you back to your PhD journey. And I think in so many ways that we see that all these experiences speak to so many people and inform so many research settings. And I'm grateful for all the people who are joining here. And thank you, Rituparna, again. I would like to again seek your permission to begin the session. Yes. So today, I think before beginning the formal session, it's also very, very important for me to share with you, other than the details that Rituparna has already shared, that my fieldwork experiences and all these settings are going to be informed through the PhD fieldwork that I did, and that dates back to my efforts right from 2010 when I started to do my M.Phil, and looking for organizations, looking for corporate organizations, looking for a variety of workplaces, work settings to see whether the ethnographic methods, whether the anthropological inquiry could be shared and could be understood and could be appreciated and could be informative to the world of both anthropology, the academia, as well as the corporate sector. With this, I think it's also extremely important that we see that I wanted to see the life beyond work, but within the confines of workplace, and how does it travel, how does it speak to different stakeholders, be it the social infrastructure, be it the people, be it the policies, be it the organizational structure, and most importantly, the methodology that we all as anthropologists and sociologists are trained to believe in. And we kind of reinstate the importance of using this method for having the situated, essentialized meanings, and so many others. Thank you again. And with this, I will start my session here and would like to show you something that I have made, and which is, I'm sure that the title is visible. It is going to situate my understanding, my practices, my experiences beyond, of course, the doctoral research, and also my limited consultancy experiences that I had and how my positionality as a PhD researcher, as an anthropologist, as a consultant, as a teacher, all of this varied and all of this informed my engagement with all of this. This is also a sweet and salty mix and ideas that I actually receive from all of these settings. And I am happy to share all of these things with you. With this, I think I want to share with you that how I wish to organize this session is that we will definitely begin with understanding the tenets, the basic features, the ideas, and the basics behind the ethnographic method. With this, we move on to understanding organizations, the kind of places, the kinds of social settings that would be of interest of many, many people here. And we would like to see how different disciplines, be it economy, be it anthropology, be it sociology, be it geography, be it political science, how each of these disciplines bring their own perspective, bring their own life world, and visualize these organizational spaces, and how ethnography as a method is a great fit, and how informative it can be. I would also want to share the limitations, the block roads, the ideas, the challenges that you face in the journey, and perhaps with sharing all of these journeys would be of extreme interest and of utility to many of us, both to the world of academia, because many of us who are wanting to do our research into this setting would be informed about what kind of problematization and what kind of step holds they should be mindful of, and also to the world of application and how an anthropologist sees this world and how can they make sense and how can both of these groups can come together for a better understanding. Coming next to the some kind of recommendations that I make, perhaps coming back from my experiences and engaging in different capacities, brought me to some solutions that perhaps might also work for you. And with this, we would like to move on to how we can bring ethnographic gaze to different areas that are relevant in the area of corporate world, and what are those what are those very interesting impact areas where all of you can take cues from and apply. The importance of discussing fieldwork experiences, I think I am the one who has always been advocating for the idea of sharing the entire process of our research work rather than just the outcome oriented, either publications or speaking about all of this, because this informs a greater background, a greater idea of people, and this is where people learn to execute their research and take onus of how they are actually able to run around their own research. In the end, we would want to move on to the ethical considerations, because I'm sure it's not just the academia, it's also the other world, which is extremely conscious of an anthropologist or an ethnographer's presence or in their premises, and they are constantly being reminded of the threat or of the insecurity or of the privacy concerns that they might have by a completely unknown person trying to understand their own world through an engagement of maybe a financial year, maybe an entire life cycle of things. So we would want to bring those ethical considerations which are important for such kind of research to be taken up, and this would be wonderful for all of you, because with setting up of these ethical considerations, I think we move on to a broader area and we move into our research goals more confidently. With this, I am moving on again to the next slide. When I talk about that, what are the important tenets and what are the important features, or what are these points that each one of us should be having in key points, I'm sure all of us are aware that it is a format, it is a type, or it is a main stockhold of qualitative research, which has these qualities, which calls on for immersion, which calls on for a long period of engagement, which is extremely reflexive. That means that you are constantly going to and fro in the process and seeing how your positions, how the field is responding to this, and accordingly we can iterate the methods, the philosophy, and so many other things. What often we see attached to the idea of ethnography and anthropological field works is the idea of participant observation. That means you are not just observing the research, you are not just engaging with the community, with the fieldwork setting, with the site. It's also that we are constantly participating. We are constantly a part of the entire dynamic that could be contributing, that could be influencing, and that could also be of very informing gaze that is important for all of us. It's important, and I take great pride in sharing this, that this is the only frame of methodology that speaks to us in multiple ways. It, of course, is a way of doing research. It's a method, but it's also a way of thinking. How do we visualize? How do we imagine things to be? Which I call this as a way of, thinking and paradigm and doing way of doing things a certain way. That means ethnography is shouldn't be seen just as a method, but also as a way of imagining, that is the paradigmatic view of looking at the things, and also the research outcome that we see in it in terms of producing a monograph, producing an ethnography in itself, and what all subtle differences are there. What is the difference in between producing an ethnography and operating with an ethnographic perspective, I think would be brought into much detail with my session. But before this, I'm sure that all of you also understand that this is one of the only methods that give you a very being near quality. It is almost a window to any culture of any community, any society, any corporate, any school, any organization that one can, any social phenomena that one is taking care of. It is also not just limited because to the idea of researcher who is actually there with the researched community. It should ideally, as a matter of writing, as a matter of craft, should also be conveying it to the reader that you're almost there, you are reading something, you are observing something extremely closely. It borrows from everyday life conversations, and it has a knack for multiple voices. It isn't located to specific or dominant voices, but it tries to strike a balance between the different stakeholders that constitute a phenomena, that constitute culture, that constitute a place and space, both accordingly. We should also be mindful of the fact that as much as rich your ethnographic study or ethnographic engagement is in highlighting the situation's reality, it's important that we vary from the local verbatim. How do they talk about things? When people approached me with talking of that, आप यहाँ क्या करने आई हैं? किस तरह से ये research होगा? कैसे कार्य संस्कृति की या वर्क कल्चर की रिसर्च होती है, एंड क्या यहाँ बैठे बैठे, क्या हमें देखकर, क्या हमारे कंप्यूटर्स को देखकर, एंड व्हाट ऑल सेंसिबिलिटीज डू यू ब्रिंग एज एन एथनोग्राफर टू द फील्ड इज एक्सट्रीमली इंटरेस्टिंग. एज एथनोग्राफर्स ऑफ एनी पर्टिकुलर सोशल सेटिंग, we are there and we are committed to capture the richness of local cultural words, as you can also see in the screen. We are always wanting to see the natives' point of view, that is the insider's view of the situation, the emics, the actors point of view, that is also the researched point of view in many words. And it's important to acknowledge that the data flow, the conversations in the field, particularly in the ethnographic case, are happening in multiple directions. That is, of course, towards you and also from you. So there is a sense of learning that the research is gaining because you're present in their field, in their natural habitat, and trying to make sense of what things are. And also, of course, how one is observing and perceiving the thing as a researcher is extremely important for all of us to understand. And I am very happy to talk here about the equation between the researcher and the researched proximity that this ethnographic method as a paradigm fills, because the reality is seen to be co-constructed. Reality is shared between these two ideas rather than the ones that we are just trying to capture one side of the story. And I would like to quote here SP Bate, which happens to be one of my most favorite articles on what happened to organizational anthropology, particularly of interest to this session, that how does this method, how does this anthropological perspective of looking at the things from near, looking at the things from belonged way, what is that ethnography or anthropology bring to the field, which is that it is only this method which can make sense, which can make an addition, which can make an extra effort to bring the historical perspective of these spaces to the field and seeing what kind of interesting correlations can be made. It also brings in the context, the wider background, the political economy, as we can call it. And all of this background contributes to our understanding of the social place, and ethnography is the medium how we do that. Why I talk of processual here, or why S.P. Bate speaks of processual or approach as being crucial to bringing ethnography or bringing anthropology in the world of business, because we often see these realities as very fixed realities, as very monolithic realities, as an idea which can be imported as best practices from one place to the other, which might not be the case in a lot of cases, as all these cases are essentially process oriented, essentially dynamic, essentially polyvocal, and there are so many voices that contribute to this reality. As I have already mentioned, that actor centered perspective, that is the insider, that is the employees, if in case we can use so, the management, all the stakeholders, the trustees, and the people who are researching, the people who belong, the people who create, people who run these corporates and these organizations. So seeing reality from multiple vantage points is something that anthropology brings on to you. With this, I move to the next slide. Understanding organizations and how do we see that being different from the other social institutions that we see is something that is brought forward to you, as in I'm sure all of you can see on the screen that these are social units or human groupings that are deliberately constructed, or they are being maneuvered to seek specific goals. And we see that they have a very clear sense of division of labor, who does what, people are paid, people are engaged, people are only granted membership if they qualify. And in what means do they do that? We'll try and figure out this. It's also of interest to all of us that how organizations can also be seen as theaters, and which essentially where people are playing certain roles, are following certain scripts of action, of talking, of interactions, of behaving. And this is what Goffman brings to the picture, and his concept becomes extremely engaging with all of us to see that it is not just the mere definitions of organizations which are important for us, but how we look at these corporates, any organization or any corporate that you have in mind, look at that with the sense of, where the site is there, where the rational coordination of things are happening, with a perfect sense of, achieving of certain goals, but how these different disciplines define and visualize organizations to be also has the capacity to steer our research very, very differently. As in economy or sociology have a distinct way of looking at these organizations, these metaphors are extremely important for us to begin our baseline understanding of the study. So I would like to highlight here how particularly psychology would see it as a individual perspective, and how a physical perspective or economist perspective would see that as a completely different value, but how role sets and how the idea of social structure which runs in the background, which person is connected to whom, which role is connected to what idea, and what role has certain sense of hierarchy, the questions of power is seen in the same way by sociology. While anthropology, I was intrigued while I was doing some literature survey for my M.Phil and PhD, and now for many other engagements, that how anthropology looks at these organizations is not typically in the work of the business that they are making, not necessarily in the way of social structure that they belong to, but essentially as cultures, essentially as cultural sites where a lot of things are happening and a lot of things are contributing to the work, to the celebrations, to the ideas, to the relationship that people are seeing bonding with their work, and so many other things. And I think all of this visualization as a background was extremely important, and now I'm sure you have a sense that how I approached the organizations was a very different lens. And when I was talking of culture to these specific organizations seeking permission for ethnographic fieldwork, all of these people seemed to be familiarized and seemed to be friendly with the idea idea of understanding culture, but their cultural systems being open by studying for an ethnographer, by someone who is outside the purview of this organizational membership, was not really taken in a very positive or as a welcoming spirit, that means. And all of these individuals, all of these organizations, all of these people in positions argued to me and still argue with the case of how such a personal, such a belonged, such a theatrical metaphor can be useful in the study of corporates who are minting monies, who are making business work, who are making certain processes. And with them, they only see people, with them they only see individuals as a mere contribution to the entire work. While as an anthropologist or as a sociologist, and so many people who are adopting the ethnographic perspective, what would be essentially important is that how do these humans make sense of the place that they are working, that they are intending to work, that they are intending to research, that they are intending to become a part of, and the story that they're trying to build forward to. With this, I want to inform all of you that this effort of understanding organizations began way early in 2010, when I was looking into these spaces, and I thought I was not prepared for this overhaul of academia industry gap that would be welcoming me. And I thought that understanding organizations, understanding culture, understanding work culture, understanding their work processes would be a welcome idea, because this is something that is core to their sense of being. They write so much, they ideate so much, they talk about this so much. In fact, this is something that they're always looking forward to amplify, to augment. But that wasn't the case. And how this particular engagement was given a feedback of being qualified as a soft research, as something which might not be able to do justice to the phenomena of organizational life, organizational work, organizational culture. With this, we move on to the next, that what all workloads were there. And these are some of the areas wherein the most resistance was sought as an access. I approached, and I was trying to approach through so many networks, including LinkedIn, including my friends, including families, including my academia circle that I was a part of, and how my research proposal of understanding the informal, formal structures and the relationships, how my research proposal carrying the objective of studying their social infrastructure, or their understanding, or their celebrations, or their events through an ethnographic eye, was looked down, because there was a certain sense how they welcomed the idea of qualitative research. They were not necessarily looking for meanings in the process, but they were more comfortable with using numbers, with using models, with using those mazes. And that caused a lot of hiccup in terms of cracking any understanding, or making an understanding of a mutual sense, and how these organizations assessed, how these organizations invited for multiple presentations, took a long time to address the idea whether an anthropologist or anthropological investigation or understanding or an ethnography could be allowed. Essentially, it was also listed in the proposal that this study would essentially be a view of a span of 13 to 14 months. And with all of this, this understanding of, this 14 months, and it was often conveyed to me that this is not, in fact, we are sure of having our employees for that time, and to have an anthropologist, to have an ethnographer in our settings, to understand what culture means to you and what culture means to them, might not be a great idea, and we need a little overhaul. And what is the use of this research? What are we going to do with this research? And what is that we will receive? How much it is going to cost us, and cost us both materially and non-materially? That means that is it going to be a dent in how we portray our understanding of culture to be? And how is this aligning of schedule that is expected to happen? So are you going to be in our office in the same time duration where our employees are expected to work, to engage, and to be not disturbed in any which ways? How is that the idea of participation, where you might not be essentially the qualified person to work either in a technological, either in an IT organization or in a social media organization or in a cargo organization. What kind of skills do you bring? And I was constantly explaining that this is an academic endeavor to understand the work people relationship, understand the culture of the workspace, understand how you imagine culture, and how do you perpetuate this entire cultural panorama, and this understanding to all your employees is what is of my interest. But they were keen on knowing that who are you going to observe, who all are you going to interview, and who is going to be that person or that idea or that criterion from where you're going to pick up these people from. And all these things of this engagement were a lot questioned, and all of these ideas were met with constant arguments of not being able to understand, appreciate this intimate setting that I was trying to bring in. It was also of brought to interest that how will you even understand the language of business, and how will you find time and comfort and space and an understanding to see, to welcome and to situate this understanding. And that is why I see that when this understanding was finally sought after, let's just say, 25 denials from various organizations from various parts of India, that I almost received denials of doing such kind of project in 2 to 3 months of time. That means it took me almost 2 years to finalize one organization that agreed to this mutual understanding of doing a project. But after that, the real struggle began, as in how to strike rapport with people who do not consider you as a part of themselves, because of they are filtering your presence through so many criterions. They might be looking at you as a spy. They might be looking at you as a managerial perspective, as someone who's trying to infringe their understanding of their social, cultural, and workspace. So all of this was happening, and how I was trying to make sense of this. And I promised them that I will not disturb them while they're working, and I will try to be as less invasive as I can, but I want to be present at multiple sites, at multiple locations, at multiple conversations, for me to understand how all of these different departments contribute to this understanding. With this, I learned the local language. I made an effort to go through their documents, the signage that was available. I was constantly trying to balance between the idea of being visible in the organization, or sitting in the libraries, or sitting in the corners, or sitting in the main lunch stream sessions or boardroom meetings. So there was a constant negotiation, very in a very humble manner, to be there or to not to be there, or where to be absent and where to be present. And people were surprised that a person who is doing nothing in the organization, why does she or he has to stay for 9 to 6 time period, and what is that you're trying to make sense of, because you're not disturbing in our schedule. But as I'm sure, as ethnographers, you will understand that we are trying to absorb, and we are trying to see so many things, and we are not in the rush to finalize our sample size, our objectives, to the clarity that we are trying, and we are basing our understanding of the things here. So with the rapport establishment in the organization came very handy. It took some time, but when it actually happened, it almost happened in the same spirit as I would recall my fieldwork in a village, and in market, and in a mall, or into different settings that I have done fieldwork on. And with this, all of this ideas of me having a very defensive start in the organization brought me to the understanding of having a clean slate, where I didn't want to bother, where I didn't want to indulge with people personally, and I was taking my own sweet time to looking for those opportunities. But people gave me those comments, and यहाँ बैठ के research कैसे होगा, आप कैसे हमारी दोस्त बनेंगी, या आप हमारे काम में से क्या क्या चीजें ऑब्जर्व करने वाली हैं, और क्या आप हमारे फोन कॉल कॉन्वर्सेशंस के ऊपर ध्यान रखने वाली हैं, और what is being played in our screen. And all of these things, I think, were coming on with this idea. of engaging with this setting so often. And this challenges, as I see that I have made forward some setting for you, that how you could, as researchers, could be of information or could be of use to these settings. I'm sure that the long-term engagement, as the organizations see in your research proposal, you could justify that time frame and adequacy by finding that you are looking for optimal networks, and this time that you are borrowing is contributing to one's own study in multifarious ways. And there are, of course, questions on how do you align goals with the organizational goals of an ethnographer, of a researcher, and of corporates. With this, I think what would help all of us, and what is still helping me, is that if there is a clarity on the idea of having this as an academic endeavor, would make sense, and how these access protocols can be fought with the variety of interface, because there are people whom organization would select that you can speak to these people, but how you create multiple interfaces with all of these things, I think this makes all the more sense to engage with these ideas. And I'm sure one is familiar with the world called gatekeepers, where they have a lot of privacy concerns on interaction, on clicking pictures, on what is writing, and so many things. The type of research that I want all of you to note down here is that how people look at this qualitative sense of inquiry could be soft, non-reliable, questionable validity, and there is a sense of how does this interdisciplinary engagement, where you are trying to see the management, where you're trying to see the anthropological perspective and putting it together, and the managers and the organizations are also seeking some recommendations from an anthropological thesis. While all of these things are to be wary of, and I would love to recall my professor Vinay Srivastava's input to this, that stay true to your ethnographic goals, stay true to this understanding what ethnography brings to the table, rather than representing some side. Be a third party observer, and with this there is a particular recall that I wish to make here, which is done by Brian Murian. He makes it a case for anthropologists who are studying corporate organizations. He has written a wonderful book on Japanese advertising agency, which says that you could use observant participation in place of participant observation at times in such places, which is of, I will put down all of these research settings for you in case anyone is interested. With all of this, what I bring to the table is that these are certain areas where ethnographic gaze, while I worked on organizational culture, my thesis was on understanding the culture of this workplace, but there are other areas in which present day anthropologists, present day ethnographers, sociologists, economists, whosoever is looking for bringing in ethnographic sensibilities to their work, is something that they can take help from these cues, that market research, cross-cultural team management, all of these things have very relevant theoretical paradigms also that are available for you, and how these ceremonies and how these organizational policies could be a very interesting source of understanding the work, understanding the cultural systems. They make a lot of sense to all of us. And I would be happy to answer questions. I would be happy to engage with all of the response that you have towards all of this. With this, why do I think that this discussion on fieldwork experiences is important? Because a distinct shift to how to do things, as in preparing of research proposals for organizational studies, for cultural studies, for ethnographic studies in corporates, essentially would mean a lot to the researchers, to the ethnographers, to the consultants, to the even people who are heading these corporate organizations, because it is essentially a very harmless way of producing the things. Ethnographers are essentially using the idea of cultural relativism, but where we see that each culture is situated against a backdrop of context, and we are all trying to pull in things from that social context where these organizations are based, and not really judging these. And that confidence needs to be provided to all these people, to all these settings. And how do we make that research design, which is a balance of both your ethnographic premise as well as it is vary of the anthropology of the corporate concern areas, based on their privacy, based on so many other concerns that I'm sure that you have. And instead of, I would also, I think, want to mention here that instead of studying these vast or these broad concepts like culture, we have many precise areas that which we can investigate and contribute, which is these ad campaigns and these teams and this running of projects and this intercultural collaboration. All of these are very active sites of anthropological and ethnographic understanding. And with this, I also want to discuss that please look at discussion of these fieldwork experiences that doing sociology is also facilitating, and we all are publishing now, that it's important to navigate our study towards a process rather than the outcome related discussion always. The last point here is that I realized that having ideal ethnographic goals were important for my study. And they were important in the sense that I wanted to stick true to these manifestation in which I wanted to do a long-term study, in order, because I had seen that there are benefits. There is a sense in being with these people for a long time to dissolve the inconvenience or dissolve these problems of distance between all of this problem of mistrust between us. But it also brought me to a session that there were various organizations which offered me position that, how about that you work in the organization and also do other things that you want to do. Also, they were not really comfortable with the time span, but they offered be a receptionist, try and work on our advertising campaign. Well, at some point of time, all of these options sounded really important, sounded really desperate to me, because I was not getting an approval. But as our advisory committee in the university also discussed to a light level, that having a role inside organization could also mean heavy on your ethnographic engagement, because you are again exposed and you are again in a setting of allegiance with the corporate in that sense. And having having a third party observation while you are working there becomes a little more challenging. So each one of these standpoints, each one of these vantage points through which you research in these corporate settings brings forward a different challenge, which we all must take note and look forward to move forward with. With this, I come to the towards the nearing of completion of this session, and I see that for both the world of academia and the world of practice, both these groups have important concerns with respect to ethical considerations. While we see that in a lot of settings, people engage with these corporate organizations, not telling them that they are doing an ethnographic or doing a qualitative research study or doing a research study outside the premises, and doing research things in engagements that do not enjoy confidence with the internal environment of a corporate. I would present my case in arguing with these management as this clarity of research objectives and this transparency of engagement always helps. It provides you an edge, because there are so many other resources that one is part of. Of course, it takes time. It's not easy. It took me so many years. But I'm sure with this growing interest into this field, this transparency in terms of what exactly is the purpose of your research is important, and this can help us nail this understanding as well. Well, as I also entered with my organization a memorandum of understanding with regard to my engagements, my methodology, my publications, my hours of being available in the organizations, my intent of being there in organizations. So each of the organization that all of us might be interested in bring forward to this memorandum of understanding, a common one mostly, if not only essentially representing one's party understanding. It was that in my case, but eventually after 6 to 7 months of my fieldwork, there was a jump in my understanding. There was a huge jump in the faith that I enjoyed with my organization and with my understanding of that social space. With this, I agree that it's important to appreciate and to formulate that understanding importantly. With this, privacy clauses will always, and they're always a part of this, wherein they put in very specific concerns that whether are you going to publish this, whether are you going to post pictures, are you going to take pictures, are you going to publish anything without our permission. So it's always good to be and creating a sense of agreement in all of these things, where I also maintained, I'm sure it's also advisable to maintain a complete anonymity of the research community or the employees or the stakeholders that are part of your research journey, and which also eventually leads to an understanding on publications, because we essentially do not or need not disclose the name of the organization that is beyond our doctoral or any short-term engagement with these corporates. And I would also argue that it's important that we also see that how, as a young female of it informed my research. It was impactful and it was restraining, and there were challenges which I have written at multiple places, which I can share, that how one's own positionality, one's own social structure in so many ways can influence this understanding. And we must be aware, and we must put down that to our understanding as well as our corporates understanding as well. With this comes that that huge drop off, that how do you justify qualitative engagement with these organizations who only understand numbers, statistics, models, and so many other predictable on the predictable insights. What we essentially do is that we document our experiences so closely, being of silence, being of absence, being of participation, being of non-participation, being of burnout that I felt observing and participating. That burnout or that mention or that opportunity that I received in the organization to work, to be ahead and to collaborate with my team members. I'm calling them my, because it eventually became a social group that accepted me in different ways. So that documentation of experiences of kinds, and when we pull in together as our insight, as our recommendation, that makes a strong, important background, that prepares our background for removing all those ethical considerations that people have, because we always have things to justify, to put forward, to engage with the audience here. And with this, I move on to the final leg of my presentation, which is that what exactly do we learn from conversations on academia and corporate, academia and industry, which is that we see that this is a particularly very solid, very, very useful, very robust method to understand the dynamic, to always emphasize creation of meanings rather than measurement, to not really always trust on what numbers tell you, rather than supplement your understanding with the numbers, with text, with information, with analysis of documents, with analysis of what people behave, what people do, how people live their life within these corporates. It has a real value add of adding the human dimension, bringing to you most innate, most belonged insights, most real, and most importantly, the multiple realities, rather than culture being a very fixed onus and a quality that can be brought upon. Well, I would also want to maintain that ethnographic ideals, the ones of participant observation, the one of ethics, the one of belonging, the one of formation, can be appropriated and maneuvered depending on the areas that you are trying to work on, but they need not be absolutely challenged. And this is one experience that I want to bring forward. While ethnographic method brings you a possibility of having a 360-degree understanding of the organizations, wherein you bring your understanding from the formal structures that they give you from the organizational chart, and also these informal connections that people make and the activities that one participates into. I particularly keep here the policies, because that's important for them to take note of, and the celebrations, which are equally important, and that reflects the range of ethnographic gaze. Well, I try to see that with these kind of efforts that ethnographers make, we see that we can bridge gaps between the understanding that we presently share between academia and industry. We also see that we humanize the boundaries, where we bring forward the contestations, the dynamic process, rather than our inquiries being based on the predictable journey. I also very strongly feel that all of this that happened in terms of judgment of these engagements with ethnography, with organizations in present Indian context, I did not apply elsewhere. So it's also important that we see and we situate that in India, there is a certain sense of repute that social sciences enjoy while respect to the contributing to, these business spaces. And while ethnographic engagement of scholars from various disciplines is welcome in other countries, but why it is not welcome as much as in India, or popular, not just to welcome, popular in India, because we need to improve this communication between the idea of social sciences and these business spaces by sharing our fieldwork experiences like this. And with this, I thank you all who all have made it, and thank you doing sociology again for this opportunity, for me being here and talking about what these fieldwork experiences mean to me and to everyone who is in this fraternity. Thank you, Rituparna. I would be happy in case there are any questions or if there are any concerns that you wish to share regarding this.
Yes, Snigdha, thank you for that wonderful talk. And, it was very, very interesting listening to you. And I'm sure, there are some questions in the chat box already. And I think we can begin with AD here, who wants to know if there are any references for ethnography of temporary communities, like protests, books, articles. And how would one approach one's approach being different in that case? Yes. And then there's another question from Lakshmi, who's asking to reflect on on observant participation, or participant observation.
Yes. I think this observant participation particularly was mentioned by Brian Murray, and as I said, he has written a very extensive book on the ethnography of business, and also he's worked on very detail in Japanese advertising agency, and he, in his own capacities of an ethnography, of an academic thesis, of a consultancy engagement, he makes it a point that while participation in such testing situations, it is highly probable that you lose hold of your observations and you lose hold of your understanding of the real facts or the social phenomena that is happening around you. With this, concepts like quasi-participation and the others are also, in the same paradigm. But how happens observant participation, where you are constantly filtering your engagement with these certain settings, and your observation role again comes down to paramountcy, but at the same time, you do not compromise on your engagement on your participation, especially in such spaces, because they tend to take most of your attention by giving some task, by giving some deadlines. So I think we can balance this out by bringing balance between them. When I see that, ethnography of temporary communities like protest and book articles, I think, yes, there's one. And there are interesting works that are happening in the development studies, particularly with respect to understanding the photographic descriptions of engagements with these people, that I can find out and perhaps share with this. And how can one handle situations where one's presence may influence the behavior? I think that is always the case, and I think that's also the beauty of this method, that one is aware of what their presence is capable of bringing to the field, bringing to the field dynamic. I think by writing, by documenting all of these things, I think that's all what we can do justice to. Yes, any other questions? Yes, we see that.
Yes, couple of other questions in the chat box.
I wanted to know, when we are bound by objectives of research, it's essential. How do we go forward? Well, ethnographic studies, as I say, that are highly iterative in nature. They give you the flexibility of framing and reframing your objectives while you are at any setting. Particularly in the corporate section, I sought permission that there might be this case that while being in the business or while being in the thick of things, my objectives might refine, or my idea of being available in the organization might be informed by my experiences. Thank you, Ananya. It makes all the sense that you go forward to how things are coming while you are participating, while you are present, and your objectives can be further informed with this engagement. Yeah. Would you please share how?
Before that, yeah, Keshav has a question. He would,
Please.
because he has a couple of questions, so I think he would like to ask them on the
Surely,
mic. So please
surely.
go ahead, Keshav.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am, for this opportunity. And thank you, Dr. Snigdha Vishnoi, for this wonderful research of yours. And I'm very glad to see a corporate anthropologist working in India. And I'm also very surprised as well. Uh, because that's a very rare thing. We are moving away from tribals and other stuff, like going for the, even in the DU itself. I
Right.
have a series of questions from the corporate side itself and one from a student perspective where I can work in the corporates and doing ethnography, only doing ethnography, not doing anything. So
Hmm.
my first question is, what are the things corporate can get out of the research you were doing that time? How does the Hawthorne effect play in the picture? And also, what are the ethical issues for respect to data for the from the corporate side? For example, say we work in 6 months over there, and we had a lot of data about the organization, say one or two organizations, and also we have to publish it in our thesis, and that's the knowledge of an organization that they really don't want to share because of their NDA, even with their own employees. Third thing, why they even entertain me in their organization? Because what they're gonna get out of it, apart from I'm making them answering some questions per schedule or interviewing, I'm even giving my time into their board meetings, which are very personal to them, and I'm not adding any value apart from apart from just getting things out of them. Right? They are corporates. They are not tribal. They are not indigenous community. They are not rural or urban community where you can work and have a good rapport. So next question is, how does rapport establishment build up in an organization? For example, you are working in an organization in academics, as in DU or in somewhere. So it's very hard to, as an outsider, to come into academics and then going from assistant to the professor with a good social capital. But as a PhD scholar in an organization, so how does the rapport establishment place? How does the Hawthorne effects for you? And what are the things organization get from it? Lastly, from a student perspective, apart from digital anthropology or product and design anthropology, apart from Sarah Pink's work, what are the things, new areas where budding anthropologists like me can see a light to? And also market research. So, what are the new domains that we can work on? Say in mergers or acquisitions, do we have a role? Can we play something on that? Or even if yes, say a PhD scholar like these big firms like MBB or something, will they entertain a PhD scholar working for mergers and acquisitions where they were working on a very
Keshav,
fundamentally side?
sorry to just disturb you in the middle, but if you could just,
Okay.
sum up your question, that would be great because we have some more questions lined up here.
Yeah, the last question is from the student's perspective, and that's all, ma'am. I'm done with the question. Sorry for the long story of questions.
Thank you, Kesha. Thank you for asking very relevant questions. I think I might be able to answer a couple of them. The one that you said is also something that I discussed in this thing, that often these corporates are, what do we gain out of this process? And in fact, this is one level where anthropologists are put to question that, what do you contribute? And they are constantly also checking up that what is your contribution? Are you writing the right things about it? And do we allow you to write this? And so many other permutations and combinations. Well, it took me a hard lesson to understand this, that as an academic endeavor, particularly at the level of M.Phil and PhD, I mean, that is at least what my experience of my advisory committee constituting of Professor P.C. Joshi and Professor R.P. Mitra, and how they dealt with these questions along with Professor Srivastava, that all of these organizations are asking you question, what do you gain? The idea is not about their gain here, very humbly putting up, because this is an academic endeavor, and for you, you are just trying to understand how their world looks like. So if we put our interest in aligned with these ideas that perhaps we would come up with some recommendations, perhaps we would give you a commentary on how a social setting like organization, how your corporate, how your employees work, like how do enjoy work life balance and then things like this. Well, I think in your elongated field period, you get a lot of times, you get a lot of occasions to inform them informally about the same, but particularly about that they're also, of course, ready to borrow things and borrow recommendations out of what you write to them in a balance between academic and their own language that they borrow. And but I think they gain and a very close quartered understanding. They gain a very unbiased and belonged narrative of what it means to be participant, in that organization, and not having this prerogative of contributing something to the organization. At least I'm talking about the M.Phil PhD level, because eventually later on I did contribute. I now collaborate with the same organization, wherein I tell them that this is what perhaps these inputs can be sought after. But at this academic engagement, one can only be sure, one can only be very transparent about the research objectives, that this is an endeavor that is be informed, that is expected to inform an academic world of the understanding of organizations, rather than informing, rather than be of help at this point of time. But eventually, when our understanding crosses that line, I'm talking from the purview of my experiences, that eventually it's only after a while that you come in a position to recommend solutions. And that is perhaps the difference between the Indian context and the other foreign context that I spoke about, that in foreign context, you are entering this organizational space and understanding this by the purview of a consultant, by the purview of an employee, wherein they readily take in such opportunities. But here, I think we operate under certain constraints, and eventually people buy this proposal with so many other things. While Hawthorne effect, it did help me in selling, in help me convincing, it helped me in putting my baseline understanding that so many other things about productivity that are listed by the disciplines, and how a managerial view is different from the down up cadre, and all of these things did contribute to my thesis. And I think it is a seminal study to bring forward and to establish a connection with the corporates. I think this is all what I can take up, but I would be happy to take this conversation ahead. Is that fine, Diti? Maybe I can respond to these questions in a while, because if in case we have to take other questions as well.
Yes, in fact,
Thank
it's
you so much, Keshav.
7 now. So what we'll do is, the next few questions are a little short, so maybe you could briefly touch upon them, or, we could,
Yeah, I'll just look at them. Yeah.
Or, whatever is convenient.
No, I am okay. I'm
Yeah.
fine. In fact, I'm happy. Yes. Sriram says that will it still be an ethnographic approach if companies get market research agency to ethnograph? Well, until and unless they are hiring ethnographers who are trained in discipline and who are given some level of independence and some level of credence to contribute to their work, that is fine. But yes, I understand that borrowing the method has become easier, has become more sellable, but attaching the theoretical lens around it is also extremely important for us like ethnographers team to understand and make sense of these market research trends. And thank you for asking this question. It definitely doesn't count as ethnography, but maybe things that are borrowing as ethnographic perspective, bringing in some perspectives should be listed as such. And yes, what are the things to be remembered for RAPO in case of multi-sited ethnography? Yes, RAPO, I think the same ethnographic, the same anthropological ideals apply. You take time. You be you be harmless. You be as less as invasive. So there are no specific charter of RAPO establishment other than to be patient, because that is exactly what this elongated time period tells you to, that it takes time to build relationships, and engaging with their work in the most settled way, reading about their documents, reading about their policies, informing their relationships. I think this makes all the more sense to invest more time and invest more observation period into these settings. Thank you again.
There's a longer question on, but I think the crux of the question is the person wants your reflection on the concept of engaged research and the extent of the impact of the study, of a study such as yours on workers, consumers, and communities. Yeah. Essentially wants to know, how does an ethnographer bring balance between these two, like, doing your ethnographic research in a corporate land and then connecting it with the new insights on culture.
Yes.
I think that is the crux of it. So that, and I guess the one last question is, somebody wants your writings. I think that we can share later on, and please Google, Dr. Snigdha Vishnoi. I'm sure you'll find her writings there. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for asking this, that, how an ethnographer can bring a balance. Ethnographer can rightly bring a balance by designing their objectives, to the suitability of the research context. Because if in case just by the endeavor of our very targeted, very focused research, we can hardly bring or hardly aim to bring a balance between these wider variables that we see in terms of impact of the study on workers, consumers, and communities. I think, sir, thank you. But the kind of engagement and the kind of very thoughtfulness, the kind of slow pace of ethnographic research that we build on, it is extremely imperative that we are operating in a sense that we are not, or we are trying to protect the employees from any kind of harm, any kind of pressure, any kind of outward gaze. While I was also party to actually some of the other researches that were happening in the same organization with different lenses, let's just say the engagement surveys, the questionnaire-based understanding, the consultant-based understanding of looking for the organizational problems. But essentially how an ethnographer can settle these scores is that they work on extremely precise objectives in a due course of time with staying true to the ideals of, this observant participation, and creating this variety of social sites within the organization. As I would like to argue that, not locating our imagination to just the boardroom meetings, not locating our attention to just protests or these representative organizations, but extending our gaze to as small as the paintings there, as the social setup over there, the conversations, the lunchtime, the celebrations, and so many other things. By expanding these our gaze, our sights, I think one can bring this due balance, and I hope that I write more. This is a very potent idea that I see in terms of bringing balance, and how does an ethnographer can bring balance or contrast to the other approaches. Thank you. I think we should be done if in case we are closing this.
Yes, I'm sure there are many questions remaining, but our speaker also has to go because it's almost 7:10 now. So anybody else, if you have questions, the recording will be up. You can put down your comments there. And thank you to Dr. Vishnoi for joining us today. So very thankful from doing sociology for taking time out and talking to us on a very, very interesting topic. And as it was evident from the questions and from the number of participants, that a lot of people are interested in this area, which is so very new, especially in India. So thank you once again for joining us. And thank you to all the participants who joined us today. And please do join Doing Sociology for future sessions, events. We'd be, we are very happy to host you all. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much.